Ethan Walker had learned to listen to metal. He could hear the freighter sigh under his gloved hands. He was a salvage pilot. Tonight, the hull felt thin and brittle. Space was quiet. The beacon on his scanner pulsed like a tired heart. He moved slowly. His suit lights cut the dark. The freighter drifted, its paint scorched and its name half lost in rust. He cut a hatch and floated through the cold. The air smelled like old fuel and broken things. Ethan's light swept across crates. He thought he had found cargo at first. Then the light hit something that did not belong. 3 small shapes lay together in a shallow pocket in the hull. They were folded up as if to take less space. He reached out with a gloved hand. One moved and opened an eye. The eye was not human. It shone like a small star and focused on Ethan with trust. They looked like nothing he had seen. Their skin had a smooth, stone-like sheen. Their fingers were long and clever. Each one was no larger than a small dog. Their chests rose and fell in slow breaths. Ethan felt his own chest match them without thinking. He picked them up one by one. They were warm under his jacket. One curled into the hollow of his shirt and tucked its head under his chin. It made a tiny sound that set a fierce protection burning in his chest. He wrapped him in an old blanket and moved back to his ship. On the way, he told himself to be careful. He checked the feed. There was no distress call from this grid. The freighter had no owner in public logs. The beacon code was old, older than most colonies. He felt a cold push at the back of his neck, like a warning. Back on his small ship, Dr. Sarah Hayes met him in the med bay. She had steady hands and a kind face. She checked the 3 beings and said, "They're alive. They are hurt, but they will live if we help them." Ethan watched her work. He wanted to tell someone. He knew the rules. But when he looked down at the smallest creature against his chest, he could not move. It looked at him and blinked. The blink felt like a plea. Ethan chose a plea. He lied. He said they were salvage cargo. He left out the freighter's old registry and the queen line marks the beacon hinted at. He left out the part about the eye that had looked at him like a lost child. A message from Admiral Thomas Briggs arrived within hours. The Admiral's voice on the comm was firm. "Secure them. Bring them to command. Do not broadcast." His order felt like an iron band around the ship. Ethan had a sinking sense. Whatever he found was more than a salvage run. Someone important wanted those 3 for reasons he did not know. Colony feeds lit up. Questions came fast and cold. Ethan hid the 3 in a spare locker and moved like a man carrying a secret that burned. That night the smallest crawled out and pressed its tiny hands against Ethan's chest where a long scar cut his skin. The little being traced the line with care. It made a soft sound that made Ethan's eyes sting. He remembered his father, the man who taught him to weld and keep a hand steady. A knock came at the cabin door. Lieutenant Jason Cole's voice said, "Ethan, we need to talk." Admiral Briggs sent a notice. Ethan put the 3 back in their blanket and smoothed his face. He opened the door. Jason stood with a tablet, jaw set. "There's a report on your call," Jason said. Someone else pinged the grid with a matching distress. Old registry tags. It's flagged as Jalar courier lines. The name hit like cold water. The Jalar were an empire with long reach. The Admiral's order made sharper sense. Ethan closed the door and sat with the 3 in his lap. They breathed like small engines of trust. He felt the weight of a simple truth. They had curled on his chest and chosen him. That choice felt like both blessing and trap. Outside, stars moved like slow eyes. Inside, alarms did not sound yet. But Ethan knew things would change. He had a life against his ribs and a decision to make. He held the blanket tight and promised himself to keep them safe as long as he could. The galaxy had leaned in. A quiet interest would soon turn to a loud demand. Ethan listened to the metal breathe and thought of the knock at the door. He understood that nothing would be the same. Ethan Walker woke the ship humming low, like a giant engine that had learned patience. He moved carefully across the cabin. The 3 small beings slept in a locker he had lined with blankets. He checked them one by one. Their breaths were slow and even. For a moment, Ethan let himself feel only the small, soft warmth against his palms. Outside, the station's comms were loud. News feeds had found a way in. Cameras showed the hull cutting from the freighter. Voices argued on every channel. People called them princesses, miracles, proof, and threat. The words hit like stones. Ethan turned the sound off and sat on the floor with his back to the locker. Dr. Sarah Hayes came down the ladder and closed the hatch quietly. She wiped her hands on a towel and sat near Ethan. "They need more tests," she said. "But not here. Not with the feeds open." Ethan nodded. He thought of Admiral Thomas Briggs' message. Secure them. Bring them to command. Do not broadcast. The order had weight. It smelled like rules and danger. A beep came from the tablet on Ethan's table. A new message waited. The header read, "Unidentified transmission priority." Ethan tapped it open. The translation software tried to make sense of sounds that were not human. For a long moment, it gave only static. Then words arrived like small stones falling into a quiet pool. "Return our daughters." The translator showed the text again and again like a mirror. The letters did not sit right in Ethan's chest. The message had the shape of a command. It had the feel of a law that crossed light years and old pacts. Someone had left a voice file, too. The patch played sounds that made the air feel thicker. The voice was low and threaded with echo. When the software painted the voice into human words, it read, "Return our daughters. Their blood binds the law. Do not hide them where laws cannot find them." Ethan looked at Sarah. She swallowed. "That's a queen's voice," she said. "The tone, the register, it's Jalar." The name landed in the cabin like ice. The Jalar had a long memory. They kept lists and debts in ways humans did not. If the queen had spoken, the station would change. If the queen had spoken, so would forces beyond the station. Lieutenant Jason Cole arrived with a tablet and a face set like someone walking into bad weather. "Command wants a ship cleared," he said. "Admiral Briggs insists on custody. They sent Agent Michael Reed to monitor." Ethan's stomach tightened. "We found them abandoned," he said. "They were on the freighter. I brought them here." Jason's jaw did not soften. "Right, but the Jalar claimed them. Command says there could be legal fallout. They want a handover." Ethan felt like a small thing in the middle of a net. He thought of the smallest creature that had curled into his shirt on the freighter. He thought of tiny fingers tracing his scar and sleeping against his heart. He could not hand them over like a package. Word left the station anyway. A camera had been near the docking clamps. Crying voices and cheering voices mixed in the feed. People sent gifts and threats in equal measure. The three beings became a story that did not belong to Ethan alone. That night, the smallest woke and climbed from the locker. It slid down the ladder like a child and curled on Ethan's chest. He lay there with it and watched the station lights through the porthole. He hummed without meaning to. The sound made the small throat vibrate, and for a moment Ethan felt safe. Then the station's gate announced an incoming object. It was small. It fell without a message. A white capsule drifted into the outer dock and blinked like an eye. No ship accompanied it. The gate log showed it arriving in a pattern that matched no human registry. Security moved slow at first. Then the capsule pulsed and a panel opened. A small drone rolled out and left a single package on the dock. The package had no markings except one old symbol none of the human analysts liked to see, a thin spiral that stamped out a law used by the Jalar centuries ago. Claire Morgan, Secretary of Outer Colonies, asked for a council. Cameras pushed into the meeting like hungry things. People wanted answers. Agent Michael Reed came to Ethan with a face that did not match the calm voice he used. "We will watch," Reed said. "We will not make a move until command orders. But be careful, Ethan. There are more eyes than you know." Ethan looked back at the three sleeping bodies and felt the simple weight of life against his sweater. He felt small and serious all at once. He wanted to be brave in a way that meant caring for the small things first. Something else happened while the station argued. The middle child woke and crawled toward the porthole. It watched the human boy run in the market below. The little one pressed its face to the glass and made a sound that made Ethan think of laughter. Its eyes brightened with a picture it did not yet know how to keep. Dr. Sarah played an old lullaby into the room. The song had no name and had no place in Jalar memory banks, or at least the translator could not map it. Still, the smallest took the rhythm and sang back with small voice. The tune and the reply made the med bay feel like a family room for a moment. Then the child said a word that had no place in human mouths. It was shaped like a small bell. Ethan repeated it by accident. The word moved across the hull like a sound in space. For a beat, the station's long-range monitors stilled. A pulse answered far away. Faint but real. Someone in the command center saw the spike. Someone in an old office renewed a file. The Queen's law had been spoken. The word the child had said matched a pattern older than the grid. It was a name and a call at once. Ethan's hands went cold. He had wanted to keep them safe. He had not meant to call anything back. The child slept again on his chest. The little chest rose and fell like a small planet. Outside, the station lights blinked in slow concern. A message arrived from the Queen's envoy. It said, "You did not answer the law. You wrote a new one." The words were not angry, but they carried the weight of a world that could remember every slight. Ethan held the small creature and understood for the first time how thin the line between hope and demand could be. He closed his eyes for a breath and thought of the freighter, of his father's hands, of the quiet before a long storm. Then the comms crackled with another voice, distant, low, and certain. "We are moving," it said. Ethan learned how to move quietly around sleeping things. He had never been a father, never wanted to be one, but he woke each hour now to check the 3 small bodies in the locker. He knew the way their breaths slowed at dawn. He knew the exact place each one liked to curl. Simple routine kept him steady in a world that felt like it could tip. Outside, the station continued to hum with talk. Law rooms argued and news anchors argued louder. Some people wanted to use the children as proof that humans had power. Others said the children were a danger and should be locked away. In the middle of this noise, President Claire Morgan wanted a calm answer. She wanted a safe path that did not lead to war. Dr. Sarah Hayes kept saying the same thing. The children needed space to heal, not courtrooms. She set a quiet room for them, soft lights, empty chairs, old blankets. Ethan took a shift watching while Sarah ran tests. He sat and read a book he did not understand, only to hear the small sounds of sleep and feel the tiny hands reach for his shirt. One afternoon, Agent Michael Reed came to Med Bay with a look like he had not slept. He moved with the careful steps of someone who carried both fear and rules. "Command wants full custody on paper," he said, "but they also want you to stay close, Ethan. No one trusts a pure chain in this case." Ethan nodded. He felt the world press in from all sides. "They will be safe with me," he said. His voice did not shake as much as he feared. Reed watched him. "You know this will make you a target." Reed said, "There are groups that will not accept the Queen's word. There are markets and soldiers who think lineage is a prize. Be careful." That night, while the station slept badly, Lieutenant Jason Cole checked Ethan's bunk for the 3rd time. He found nothing wrong in the room, but he noticed a small scrape under the floor panel, a chip like a tiny eye. The chip had been tucked into the wood, small as a fingernail. Jason tapped it and found a hidden message inside. It recorded the face of a cloaked figure moving through the hallways. The figure had stopped near Ethan's door and then moved on. Jason took the report to Ethan and Sarah. Ethan felt sick in a small way. Someone had been inside his cabin while he slept. Someone had watched the children. They moved the children to a new place, a secure room at the heart of the station, near the council wing. The council insisted on a guarded space. President Claire Morgan agreed to a private meeting in the Med Bay before the transfer. Ethan arrived with the 3 wrapped in blankets. He looked tired in a way that did not belong to his age. The small one, the middle child with the quick eyes, woke and slipped from his arms. It walked without sound to President. Cameras were not allowed in the room, but word spread fast. The child stood at Claire Morgan's feet and reached out a tiny hand. The President bent and took what the child offered. It was a bead. The bead was clear as water and small as a coin. It glowed faintly when Claire held it. The bead had a pattern inside that seemed to move like a tiny tide. For a moment, Claire stared as if she had seen a memory. Her face softened. People who watched the feed later said the President had an odd look, like someone listening to a story told in another language and understanding the meaning without the words. No one could read the bead. Dr. Sarah scanned it with every tool she had. The patterns inside did not match any human data set. They were not simply light. The bead seemed to hold a feeling, a song of home, of rain on metal, of a mother's hand. When Claire set the bead on the table, it left a faint scent of warm metal in the air. Whoever had created it had made something meant to be kept close. The council argued about what the bead meant. Some said it proved a royal link. Others warned it could be a trap. Ethan only watched the little faces and felt the slow swell of something like hope. The bead had changed the room in a way that no argument could touch. Late that night, Ethan sat alone with the children while Dr. Sarah lived in a lab and Agent Reed watched the doors. He hummed a song he remembered from his father. The middle child listened and then gently tapped his chest. It made a small sound that fit the tune. Ethan felt like a man giving an answer to a prayer he had not known how to pray. Then the lights in the corridor went off for one dirty second. It was a carving of darkness, quick and designed. Ethan heard the soft click of a boot. He stood and moved the door. The med bay's outer hall was empty. Cameras showed only empty air. But Jason's chip recorded movement at the far end of the station, a squad in long cloaks. They moved in pattern, not like thieves, but like something that had planned its steps. The sound of metal on metal came close. A panel on the med bay wall whispered. Ethan's heart hammered. He reached for the blanket. The small one stirred and made a small noise like a bell. The quiet broke. Alarms did not sound. The cloaked figures were careful. They had something like old keys. One of them slipped through a maintenance hatch and moved toward the med bay like a shadow. Ethan had only seconds. He wrapped the children close and checked the small lock. The lock was good, but the cloaks had tools that bent metal like thought. Outside, the council room argued about words and treaties. Inside, 3 tiny lives slept and one man listened to the slow close of a door that should not open. Ethan tightened his hold. He had no plan beyond holding and running. The world had given him a choice before. Save small things or follow rules. He had chosen once already. A distant voice in the station's network whispered, "They come for the line." The words were cold and certain. Ethan slid the med bay floor light to red. Like a small knight, he felt everything narrow to the weight against his chest. The cloaked figures moved like tides. The station watched and waited, but its eyes were not always fast enough. The door panel clicked again. This time the knock was not polite. It was the sound of the thing that had come with orders, and the orders did not include mercy. The sky above the station turned red like someone had cut a wound in space. Ethan Walker watched it from the defense barge's open deck and felt the color in his teeth. The warning light sang. People ran. The Queen did not make a loud voice. She made fleet wings and moved them where the light could not hide. Ethan held the small blanket on his lap. Inside, the daughters slept. He could feel their tiny breaths like small engines. The ship shuddered under the first distant blast. It was not meant for them yet, but war does not always care for timing. Commander Leo Ortiz stood at the bow and gave orders in a voice that was short and steady. Fighters up. Shields on half. Use the decoys. Her plan was simple and dirty in the best way. Confuse the enemy, hide the small things, do something no one expected. Human pilots rose like hungry birds. They flew close to the alien carriers and then broke away at odd angles. Small craft reflected light and left false images. Mirror tactics, fast jumps, and old tricks that work when hunger outweighed technology. These were the tools humans had when they stood against larger foes. Ethan did not know how to fight. He knew how to hold small things, but he learned quickly under fire. He walked the hold where the children slept in a medical cradle and checked their straps. Dr. Sarah Hayes sat near them, her hands moving like a surgeon, not like a soldier. Her eyes stayed calm. She looked up at Ethan once and said, "If they wake, keep them low and sing. It helps." The daughters did not speak the same war language as humans. Their sound were small and rich, like bells. When the enemy's ships came closer, one of the small ones woke and hummed without meaning to. The sound rolled through the metal like a tide. Something odd happened then. The alien sensors nearby flickered, as if the sound touched a bad wire. A carrier 2 kilometers out drifted, and then stilled like a sleeping whale. Human pilots felt the change like a luck swing. They leaned on the opening and pushed deeper. On the bridge, Admiral Thomas Briggs watched the readings and tightened his face. "That sound. It is interfering with their lock," he said. "Keep them safe. Use that gift if you must." Ethan felt both fear and a strange hope. The small girl's hum had broken the machine's thought. The crew used the opening to slip through a gap and reach a carrier that was slightly slower. They struck a weak point, a seam no one expected. But miracle after miracle can tempt bad choices. As explosions bloomed like dark flowers, a gap opened in the hold walls. Shrapnel screamed. Smoke moved fast and thin. Alarm lights painted the small faces in red. Ethan dove. He reached the cradle and grabbed the nearest daughter. The straps had torn. A small hand slipped from his reach. He heard the clank of the outer door as a figure moved fast up the hall toward the cargo bay. The child was gone. Time narrowed to a single crack. Ethan's mind chose one thing. He ran. He ran while metal bent and air burned. He hit the outer hull and looked up into a sky full of enemy lights. Through a gap between carriers, a needle of movement slid across the black and vanished into a far orbit. The ship that took the child used the Queen's private channel. It was quiet and fast. Commander Ortiz pushed the barge harder than she had any right to. Her pilots opened a path into the old navigation manuals at the computer like a prayer. They used blind jumps through plasma pockets and old, risky maneuvers that would make a test pilot laugh and cry at once. Ethan watched them and stole the courage of people who had no choice. "Boarding team," Leah said. "We go after them." Ethan felt hands on his shoulders. Lieutenant Jason Cole strapped a small oxygen unit to him and a harness. "You come with us," Jason said. "You and your stubborn heart." They moved like a hunting party with tools and hope. The rescue craft punched through debris and smoke. Enemy fighters moved to stop them, but the daughter's still reached out like a small ghost and threw off a few locks. Human pilots used that and found a blind lane. The Queen's palace ship was not like any station Ethan had seen. It was long and folded like a sleeping animal. It held light inside like a memory. As they drew close, Ethan felt a cold that had nothing to do with space. It was the weight of a mother watching numbers and debts. It was a careful kind of anger. They slipped into the palace's outer ring and found a silence that did not sound empty. It sounded full of history. Ethan's hand shook when he thought of how small the daughters had been when he found them on his chest. He thought of them now, and his mouth tasted like copper. Inside the palace, the corridors were quiet as old halls. Servant circuits hummed and closed like doors. The rescue team moved slow and low. Jason opened a maintenance hatch, and they slid through the ship like ghosts. Ethan's heart thudded with each step. Memory beads, the kind Claire had seen, were set into the walls like quiet lights. They pulsed faintly. The ship smelled faintly of rain and hot metal, the same as the bead had smelled. They reached a chamber lit like dusk. There, on a low bench and wrapped in a soft cloth, sat the daughter they had lost. She watched them with eyes that knew more than the room held. She did not cry. She only sat and turned a small hand as if testing a surface. Before Ethan could move, the doors opened wide. Someone stood in the frame. She was taller than any human. Her face was older than any book. Her robe folded like a map. The room seemed to fold into silence. "You have come a long way," she said. Her voice did not shout. It rolled like a law. Ethan felt something inside him go quiet. He felt the name of his father, the sound of a weld, the first time he had left home. In that small pause, he felt the Queen look at him and know. She stepped forward, and the daughter stood and placed her small hand in the Queen's. The Queen looked at Ethan as if reading an old ledger. "Why?" she asked simply. Ethan's answer rose like a small flame. "They curled on my chest," he said. "I cannot leave them." The Queen's face did not change much. She listened like an old judge who had heard many excuses. Then she tilted her head and spoke his name. It was not a shout. It was a sound that made the corridor behind Ethan feel thin and far. "Ethan Walker," she said. The name on her lips felt like a door opening. Ethan's breath stopped for one honest beat. The rescue had reached the center. The Queen had said his name. Ethan Walker stared at the Queen and felt his chest tighten like a drum. The room smelled of hot metal and rain. The daughter he had chased sat between them, small and steady. Her eyes watched Ethan with a calm that made him feel both proud and very afraid. Queen Jalara did not move like a leader who wanted to punish. She moved like a mother who had kept a ledger for grief, her hands folded in front of her. The robe at her shoulders looked like maps of long wars. She looked closely at the child and then at Ethan. "You touched what I would have hidden," she said. Her voice was low, and every word carried weight. "Tell me why." Ethan thought of the night he had found the three on the freighter. He remembered the smallest pressing its face to his chest and sleeping like a child who trusted the world for the first time. He thought of his father's voice and of welding metal by hand. The words came simple and true. "They were alone," Ethan said. "They needed a hand. I could not leave them." A long silence followed. The Queen's face did not show fury. It showed a long counting of days and debts. She watched Ethan as if he were a book and read a line she had not expected. Queen Jalara told a story then. She spoke of a sickness that had taken part of her line. She said that centuries ago, a plague struck the royal children. The Queen had hidden 3 daughters away in secret crates and closed the records. She had meant to keep them safe until the empire healed. But spies and old laws had tangled the secret into danger. The Queen's voice carried old sorrow. "We keep line," she said simply. "We keep memory. To lose a line is to break a promise to our dead." Ethan listened and felt the weight of history settle into the room. He did not understand all of it. He understood, though, the sound of a mother who had lost and would not lose again. Why give them back now? Ethan asked, "Why not keep your law?" Queen Jalara looked at the daughter who had been taken, and then at the other 2 who had curled under blankets in a soft crate near the door. "Because to hide them forever is to steal a life," she said. "Because the world changes. Because I wish to see what trust might do." The Queen folded her hands. "I will not burn a world for my grief," she added. "But the law asks for a choice. I offer it now." She moved closer and touched the small daughter's head the way a human might touch a child's hair. The small one looked at Ethan and then at the Queen. In that look, Ethan saw something like an answer. It was simple. It was a breath. Queen Jalara's offer surprised many. She proposed a bargain that no one had expected. The daughters would live where they could learn both people's ways. Ethan, the man who had found them, would be their guide in human life. The Queen would teach them the old memory songs and the weight of Jalar law. The exchange would become a new kind of treaty, not written only by lawyers but sealed by a promise that a human voice would help shape royal hearts. Back on the station, the council met in haste. President Claire Morgan and Admiral Thomas Briggs argued in crowded rooms. Some wanted to sign the bargain and call it a victory for peace. Others feared that taking royal children into human care would be a weakness. Protesters filled screens and markets. Some cheered, others threatened. The world waited with a slow, held breath. Ethan sat in the quiet after the Queen's offer and felt the choice like a soft blade. He had no idea how to teach royal children to be human. He had no training to raise rulers. He had only a stubborn heart and the small, real care he felt when a child curled on his chest. He said yes. The words were small, but they carried like a bell. The Queen nodded, and a clerk in her hold began to write the first lines of a treaty that would list not only trade and ports, but also a promise. 3 children would live a life with both names and both songs. The Queen watched Ethan with something near gratitude. The rescue that had burst into the Queen's palace ship ended not in chains, but in a new ritual. The Queen and the human leader signed a simple passage. The daughters would be given a choice when they were older, and until then they would be raised with both her memories and Ethan's small, stubborn ways. The treaty surprised commanders and bankers alike. It startled war councils. But in the long halls the bead Claire had been given glowed like a small truth. When Ethan left the palace ship, the sky above them was quiet. Ships had not yet unrolled for parade or threat. People watched feeds and argued, but something had shifted. A queen had chosen a promise instead of fire. A human had chosen care instead of fear. Ethan walked back to his ship with 3 small lives at his side and the Queen's promise in his hands. Dr. Sarah Hayes waited at the dock, tired and smiling. Commander Leah Ortiz and Lieutenant Jason Cole waited too. They had fought with blood and wit, and now they served a softer task. In the month that followed, the daughters learned small human things. They learned to hold a cup and to laugh at a clumsy joke. They learned to sweep rust from a hull and to sit in a room where people argued without shouting. In return, Queen Jalar sent memory beads, small, glowing tokens of song, that let humans hold a picture of Jalar homes. Rain on amber terraces, the sound of memory songs that taught patience and the weight of law. The galaxy watched and adjusted. Trade shifted. Old enemies whispered. New children learned to speak 2 names. Ethan spent quiet nights teaching them how to fix a broken bolt and how to tell a true story. He found he liked telling stories. The small hands that once curled at his chest now took his fingers and learned to write a name in the dust. In the end, what changed the galaxy was not a fleet or a law. It was a human who had chosen to protect a small life when no one else watched. The Queen kept her line. The daughters kept their choice. The world kept a new kind of promise, one made by a man with a scar and 3 small, stubborn hearts.